And good afternoon, HousingLIN members and very welcome guests to this 2-hour HousingLIN Cymru Symposium. My name's Joanne Kirrane and I'm the Chair of HousingLIN Cymru and the Executive Director of People, Homes and Communities at Melin Homes, which is based in South Wales. I think before I hand over to Jeremy, I really just want to thank you all for making the time to join us this afternoon, because I think sometimes when the pressure's on, it's easier to focus on the urgent over the important. And what is important is that we operate in a very challenging operating environment. And if we think the fallout from COVID, loneliness, isolation, cost of living crisis, the cost of maintaining homes and developing new models of housing for older people, we know that there are reductions in public spending, and we strive to respond to the needs and aspirations of our customers, while at the same time we're very aware of the implications for cost, quality and design. And certainly in Wales, the decarbonisation agenda and WHQS2 are just some of the factors in the operating environment that act to impact on housing for older people in Wales. And so I see this afternoon as a fantastic opportunity for steering group members to share some examples of how organisations are actively and positively responding to these challenges through innovation, partnership, technology, to build resilience and achieve better outcomes at individual, organisational, local and regional levels. So Jeremy really doesn't need any introduction. Everybody knows Jeremy, but I'm hand over to Jeremy now. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your intro, Joanne, and a really excellent sort of summary of why a session like today is so important. And it's great that we can put the spotlight on Wales. And can I personally also thank you for chairing the steering board on behalf of steering board members. And we also can celebrate today that we have a new board member joining in ATAPPI group over in Pembrokeshire and West Wales, and Mark, I'm sure, will join the meetings and will help shape our 2024 programme. But we've again sort of decided to keep this session virtual. We really wanted to do something in person, but instead we're doing really a marketplace where we're going to, as Joanne said, celebrate and share some of the sort of work that individual members and our partners are undertaking. We've got a really exciting programme for you, and a series of rapid fire presentations really, and then a chance for a conversation at the end. But can I also thank, on behalf of the HousingLIN, all our members for sponsoring the HousingLIN here in Wales, and also to the UKRI Healthy Ageing Challenge for their support of our Happy Hour series generally. Many of you may not know that the chair of the Healthy Ageing Challenge is no other than Helena Herclots, who's the Older Persons Commissioner in Wales. So again, a really good segue to our Welsh activities. So this afternoon we've got a series of presentations followed by a short break and then another series of presentations. So a format of two halves. We're going to kick off shortly with one of Joanne's colleagues, Michelle, who's going to talk about experience of redeveloping the sheltered housing scheme. She will be followed by David from Cardiff City Council about their work in partnership with the LIN about reimagining our housing for older people. Delighted that Charlotte could join us from the TSA, and she's going to talk about the emerging findings from the TAPPI project. And again, unfortunately, Vicky from Pobble wasn't able to join us today, but we'll touch on a little bit of what Pobble is doing. And Tom, thanks for joining us this afternoon too. You're going to be looking much more around the decarbonisation agenda and the sort of innovation of technology for sustainable living and some of the work that you're doing at Clwyd Allen. So that's going to be the first half. We're then going to have a short comfort break, and I invite you all to sort of turn off your screens and keep your phones, your microphones muted, and we'll come back and we've got an exciting afternoon session with Gary, who's going to kick that off, looking at different solutions to strengthen age-inclusive communities and the work that they're underway across, I think it was Bridgend and Port Talbot in particular, followed by Alan, who again a long-standing member of the LIN too. Looking at different sort of community-based solutions in a challenging environment, perhaps picking up on some of the points that you already reflected on, Joanne. And last but no means least, wonderful to have Sian back with us as well, looking at resilient care at home and some of the work the United Welsh have been leading on. We'll then have a chance for a group discussion. We may be able to answer some of the Q&As that you post in the chat box. And then Joanne and I are going to draw the session to a close at 5 o'clock. So we've got a packed just under 2 hours now. And I'm going to invite Michelle to kick off. And many thanks for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'll just share my screen. Okay, just checking everyone can see that. Thank you, Sally. Okay, this afternoon, I'm going to take you through a very quick gallop of our experiencing of redeveloping a sheltered housing scheme, which is our scheme Tredegar Court in Pill in Newport. So Tredegar Court was built back in the early 1980s and consisted of 2 blocks. The first block, which is shown in the photograph here, consisted of a mixture of 39 bedsits and flats. Over time, the bedsits had become unpopular and sadly quite difficult to let. The building over time became dated and felt quite institutional. We also had some issues with, while the gardens look absolutely lovely in this photograph, there was an awful lot of unused land around the scheme itself, and it became quite expensive to maintain, and those costs get passed on to residents. So ever mindful of keeping our schemes affordable, that was becoming more and more of an issue. Alongside that, we had some quite major failing components, including the communal heating system and the fire alarm system. And then alongside the block that you can see in the photograph, there's a second block of flats where we didn't have the same issues at all. This was completely separate, but the residents there used some of the communal facilities in the first block. So back in 2014-15, Joanne and I worked very closely with Ridgeway consultants who helped us carry out a feasibility study of all of our sheltered housing schemes. And to do that, they carried out surveys of our existing residents and also applicants on the waiting list to find out what they wanted from sheltered housing and what their priorities were. Ridgeway also undertook surveys of staff, including our scheme managers, board members, and our senior management team. And alongside that, our assets team undertook condition surveys of our existing stock as well. And this resulted in us developing an options appraisal for each scheme, which was then fitted into one of 3 categories, which I'll talk about in a sec. We also, from all of this information, developed an investment plan for the next 10 years, and we're now coming towards the end of that period. So these are the 3 categories that we fitted each of our schemes into. The first one, which was the refresh category, thankfully was the one that most of our sheltered housing schemes fitted into. And this basically consisted of a refurbishment of the building, so redecorating the communal areas, new furniture, and really refreshing and modernising the schemes to ensure that they remained relevant and attractive. The second category was our refurbish and redevelop category, where we had some buildings that were in need of significant investment with major components failing. But they still had reasonable demand. And then our final category, which only one of our schemes fitted into, was where we were getting a lot lower levels of demand for the accommodation, but the building was relatively fit for the future, but maybe not for the client group. So Tredegar Court fitted into the refurbish or redevelop category, and making this decision fitted in with the timing of our board making a decision to remove bed sits wherever possible from our stock. So in order to move forward with Tredegar Court, we worked really, really closely with Newport City Council, particularly their housing strategy team, but also with their social care department as well, particularly occupational therapists, to get their views on the future of Tredegar Court as well. And what the council did was they confirmed that there was absolutely a need for sheltered housing in the Pill area of Newport, and that they would also support us with the use of social housing grant funding. At the same time, we also confirmed our model of sheltered housing, which is a little different maybe to what other housing associations provide, but we committed to having a scheme manager at every scheme with a communal lounge where activities could take place to try and prevent and reduce social isolation. We recognise that our lifeline alarm systems need to be reviewed, and that's an ongoing project. And we also decided that we would retain our 55 plus age criteria. At the same time, we also reviewed our scheme manager service to remove reliance on what was then known as supporting people funding. So by August 2017, we'd developed our first proposal for Tredegar Court, which was to convert the bed sits into flats, so effectively knocking 2 or 3 bed sits to create 1 and 2 bedroom flats. We also proposed to extend the block to include additional flats to offset any loss of income. We propose to fully refurbish the communal areas and upgrade those major components that were failing. And crucially, I think if there's one lesson that we learned through this process, we made a really good decision to recruit a liaison officer to work with residents to decant them from the scheme. Given the scale of works, that was absolutely essential, and their contribution to the project can't be underestimated. So throughout, we kept the residents updated, and then in October 2017, we carried out some formal engagement with the residents. We shared our plans and also the need for them to decant to alternative housing while the project was undertaken. We also engaged the local community. And this is where things didn't go quite so well. We held a formal engagement event in July 2018, and unfortunately, the feedback that we had from the local community was that they didn't much like our plans. They challenged the design, the scale, the height, the impact. Tredegar Court is located in a terrace street, and what we were proposing was felt to be quite overbearing. So we had to have a change of plan. So we took some time to reflect on the feedback from that engagement event, and in November 2018 we made what was a massive decision for us, which was to demolish the existing block and start from scratch and build a new scheme, retaining the second block of walk-up flats. They were fine, but that block with the bed sits had to go. Within a few months, Newport City Council had again continued to confirm their ongoing support and significantly increased the amount of social housing grant funding that they committed to the project, which was just over £4 million in total. By the March of 2019, all 39 households had been decanted. And we continued our formal engagement with the residents and the local community. This time, the local community really liked our plans, which we were really pleased about. So we were able to move forward with full support from them and our residents. And I guess a lesson learned for us from that was maybe we should have been a bit braver earlier on. And what we ended up with was a scheme with a total investment of over £8 million, which was massive for us. But I hope you'll agree that it was worthwhile in the end. So in June 2020, we started demolishing the block at Tredegar Court. And of course, our timing was absolutely dreadful. The pandemic was obviously happening at the time, and the impact was significant for us in terms of delays, the impact on the supply of materials and safe working practices. For our contractor, Vistry Partnerships, that had a massive impact. And also there was so much that we wanted to do in terms of continuing to engage with the local community that really had to be put on hold because of the restrictions that came along with the pandemic. For the residents that were living in the walk-up flats, they were effectively living on a building site. And although they were very, very supportive and we kept them updated throughout, it wasn't easy for them. It was a very disruptive time. It was very much helped by the fact that they had a good relationship with the scheme manager, and the contractors team on site were brilliant with the residents and kept them informed all the way through. One of the biggest challenges for us, though, came from the residents when they had to lose garden space, which during the pandemic, having access to that outside space was so vital. And I'm sure Joanne will remember attending meetings in the rain at the scheme outside, trying to come to a resolution with the existing residents and their local representatives regarding how we could try to maintain some outside areas during the development work for them to use. So just over 2 years later, we took handover of our new building, which is shown in the photographs here. So this is our new block at Tredegar Court. And what we've been able to provide is a block that provides an increased number of units in total. So we've got 47 units in the new block that you can see there in the photograph. And that's a mixture, mainly 1-bed flats, but also some 2-bedroom flats as well. You can see just beyond the new block in the photograph, the 28 walk-up flats, and also there's a 2-bedroom house in that block as well that were retained. So you can see how close those flats were to the new development. I've mentioned obviously the overall investment of over £8 million. And I'm pleased to say that since August 2022, we've had very, very low numbers of voids at Tredegar Court, but alongside that, very high demand for any voids that we have had. Some decisions that we made, we deliberately didn't install a lifeline alarm system in the new block. Instead, residents purchase their own alarm if they need it. It's a very thermally efficient building, so there's no heating in the communal corridors, again, to try and keep service charges affordable. And what we'll be doing in the future is investing further in the block of walk-up flats as well. So that was very much a very quick gallop through what was a long and complicated project, but which has provided good quality, affordable sheltered housing that we're very proud of in Newport. My contact details are on the screen. Please, if you'd like to come and visit or learn more about Tredegar Court, please contact me. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of the LIN and Joanne, can I thank you for a really excellent presentation. And I was just thinking about the challenges that you experienced both during COVID, but also thinking about the community engagement. But it was also about the building materials and everything as well. So it's both the social architecture and the building, the physical architecture, sort of combining. So I'd love to have a conversation with you about that separately. Perhaps that's something we can follow up with you. Perhaps there's a HousingLIN inspirational achievement or something like that in next year. We're now joined by David from Cardiff City Council. David, I'm delighted that you're there. I'm just trying to see you on the screen. I saw your details there.
Hi, Jeremy.
Hi, great. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
And we're going to move over to you and some of the work that you've been doing in the City Council. So are you all right to kick off?
Yep, fine. Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen, make sure I get this right.
Brilliant.
Right. Okay, can you see that?
It's just taking it now. We can. Lovely.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so just going to run over our what we call our community living new build program. So community living is our name for extra care essentially at Cardiff Council, and our new build plans for the next few years. don't know if that's, there we go. So I just thought I'd spend a little bit of time just talking about the background of how we developed our strategy. And I'll talk through how we got to where we are now. So our housing strategy in 2016 gave a commitment that we would develop a separate older person strategy. In 2018, we commissioned research into the future housing needs of our ageing population and the care needs across Cardiff and the Vale, so across the Health Board region. HousingLIN were commissioned in order to review our current provision of older person housing across the city, the demographic changes and the impact of that in our housing need, the review of care and support needs of people currently living in older person accommodation and those on the waiting list for older person provision. Importantly, residents' views of what they would want as far as housing provision goes, and we set up a housing association working group as well. The older person housing strategy was launched in 2019 with some key findings. Essentially, it determined that we needed to increase the supply of suitable adaptable accommodation, so new build accommodation for our housing stock, invest in our existing stock, but have a more person-centered approach to housing older people as well. And there were a number of commitments delivered in the new housing strategy. And my role is to deliver the new build element. So what are we actually doing? Well, we developed a development program. So I currently manage our new build program, building our own council homes across the city. We're obviously retained our housing stock. And we've developed a strategy to deliver 12 new older person or community living developments across the city. So this will deliver around about 620 older person apartments in community living blocks. It's an investment of around 200 million over the next 8 years. Importantly, we plug the gaps across the city. So there's wards of Cardiff that don't have purpose-built sheltered housing or older person accommodation. So we're building new schemes in those areas where they're most needed. We're also building our first wellbeing village, looking at health and wellbeing, as well as combining health and social care services with older person accommodation. And we're delivering our first multi-generational living scheme for larger families that want to live together. Our scheme is funded through our own capital programme, subsidised with Welsh Government support and grant. So I look after the capital element, and of course we have to ensure there's a business plan in place with a sustainable plan for our revenue to staff and deliver suitable services from the buildings. So what are we actually building? Well, we're delivering homes that are adaptable, accessible, but importantly enable residents to live independently for longer. Having your own front door is really important, but also for us, removing the need as far as possible for future adaptations. So the accommodation can adapt around a person's changing needs. Things like providing level access showers that feel domestic but are suitable for future care provision, open plan living dining, increased storage, as Michelle was saying earlier, looking at affordability to heat and power. So all of our developments are very thermally efficient. There's no fossil fuels. We're using ground source heat pumps or air source heat pumps, underfloor heating, solar PV and battery storage. Access to private outdoor space has become increasingly important, particularly sort of lessons learned through the pandemic and so on. But importantly, our schemes need to be attractive for downsizers. That's a big part of the strategy, enabling or encouraging with high quality new accommodation, encouraging older people to downsize from larger family homes into something more appropriate for them. And this is proving to be a real success of our program. So that's the property side, the person side, but importantly, we want to deliver a range of communal facilities within the buildings. We provide a flexible space suitable to provide a hub of services for older people. We're introducing into that agile working space, so we can deliver care in the locality, and we can jointly deliver services with our colleagues in the health board. And this obviously helps to tackle social isolation within the local community in which we build new schemes. To develop our specifications, we reviewed good practice across the UK. We engaged the RNIB and HousingLIN to help us. We developed a brief, but importantly, we appointed experienced design teams for each project. So just some images of what we're actually building currently. These are CGI images of living space. So every property has access to a patio or a balcony, a usable sized balcony or patio from the bedroom and lounge areas. We have open plan living, dining, and increased storage. Having your own front door is we found to be a really important aspect when we're trying to encourage downsizing, but we can't always achieve this through external walkways. It's not always the most efficient way of building new properties. So where we have internal corridors leading to front doors, it's really important to us that that feels like an external setting. And so it's not a narrow, dark space, but it's well lit, using atriums where possible, and if we can afford it, with light flooding through, and spaces where people can sit and chat to neighbours. We also introduce, I've seen it on many schemes before, but obviously introducing windows onto that space from kitchen areas and so on, so people can see neighbours walking past and so on. So it feels like an external space, although it is inside. Entrances to be light and airy, a welcoming place to sit and wait for friends or a taxi or so on. Many of our schemes, because we've got lots of infill constrained brownfield sites across the city, lots of our schemes have rooftop terrace gardens, private space for residents to use, as well as a small communal garden on the ground floor for more public focused events, and obviously communal lounges that can provide a range of different activities going on. So just a couple of schemes that we're building currently. This is our first scheme. It actually hands over this month. So next week, we take handover of 41 flats in a building called Addison House, which is the former Rumley High School site just off Newport Road in Cardiff. It does have a private roof terrace, communal lounges and kitchens, agile working space for our own staff and health and social care staff as well. Things like flexible medical room, guest suite, scooter charging and storage. And we're introducing on this project a pilot pool car scheme, so an EV, electric vehicle pool car scheme for residents to use as well. This actually has external walkways, so what you're seeing on this image is the external walkways to everyone's front door, and then they're dual aspect flats. So the other side of the flat you have a private balcony, and ground floor you have a patio. Image from the front, and you can see the external walkway there. And then this is actually our show flat. So we're currently we've dressed one apartment as a show flat, and this is specifically to target the residents that we're trying to encourage to downsize, so that they can get a real sense of how the flats feel inside and the facilities that the flat has, and the aspects from the balconies and so on. This has proved to be a real success. So we've had 30 viewings so far for potential downsizers, and 29 of the 30 that we've shown around have actually signed to move into a flat. So it's a really big win for us. Just a drone shot of the scheme. You can just see the roof terrace in this part of the building here. So there's actually a residence lounge that opens out onto the roof terrace, and then of course this will all be landscaped for the garden space on the ground floor. We have a scheme that we've actually just started now. So Hale have won this project. They started on site 2 months ago. So this is our scheme at Butte Street in Butte Town. So this will deliver 45 flats. It will be completed in January 2025. We have internal corridors here, so you can see the atrium, and we've got windows at the end of each corridor as well to allow light to flood through. We have a roof terrace with access out onto the roof terrace for residents. So that's a private space for residents with a ground. You can see on the second image the community garden on the ground floor, and the idea is that the flexible rooms on the ground floor can open out onto the garden space during good weather. We've introduced agile working space, similar sort of communal facilities as the previous scheme that I showed. And our scheme in Canton, Leckwith Road in Canton. So this scheme actually serves two purposes. This is an area of really high demand for social housing, but an area in which we have very little opportunity to build social housing. It's a very popular area of the city, so lots of sites that become available for purchase tend to get bought by private developers for high-end private development. I actually think our scheme looks like a high-end private development myself, but we were able to, so this site actually had a community centre on it that was closed during the pandemic as part of the council savings. that community centre was shut. But it was a well-used and well-loved facility by our local community. So we were able to persuade our estates team that rather than sell the site on the open market, we could appropriate the site into our development programme. We could actually replace the community centre, slightly smaller, but we could still deliver a community centre for the public to continue to use, managed by our hubs team, which is in the second image. You can see this green roof. That's half the community centre, and the other half goes into the building. But we would also provide a community living scheme as part of the same development. So we can combine a community centre, additional facilities on the ground floor for the residents living in the building, private community space, public gardens, and we're re-providing a multi-use games area as well. So I think the scheme was delivering a lot for that particular ward, but also 41 flats for older people. And just finally, a slide just sort of giving a flavour of the types of spaces we provide on the ground floor. So this is actually a ground floor plan of the Butte Street scheme. So we have a number of, quite a range of things going on here. We have space for staff. So that's agile working space, welfare facilities, washing facilities. We have communal laundry room, reception area for our scheme manager to be based, medical suite that can be used for a range of different things. We have a ground floor residence lounge that opens out onto the garden space, but we also have a larger flexible room that can be one large space or subdivided into two that could be used for different services and activities for residents living in the building, but also to encourage people to come in, and we can run all sorts of activities from that room. And on the other side of the building, with a separate access, we have a community space. So we actually put this out to local community to see if there's any community groups that wanted to come and use such a space. So it's gone to a local gymnastics group that will come and lease this space from us for a number of years. And that part of their business plan was also to provide fitness classes and activity classes for the older people living in the building as well. So next steps for us really, well, we've asked HousingLIN to help do a review of what we're building. So they recently came out to see us at Addison House, and we did a tour of the building. And it was twofold really. That exercise was really to understand or to get feedback on what we're building and the specification that we developed for our flats and the spaces within the building, to understand whether the things we can improve on or things we can deliver slightly differently. And the second part of the review is to help us understand how we can make the most of the spaces we're providing on the ground floor and the community spaces that we're providing. We also are currently engaged with Cardiff and Vale Health Board about what that sort of locality working space could deliver, and the use that they could make of those spaces as well, all of which will feed into our next set of developments that we're building. Okay, Jeremy, that's the end of my presentation.
Thanks very much for giving us a really rapid overview, but lots of insight there. And I know the team were with you recently, and they're really excited about the quality of the design, the layout, the environment, the social interaction, and the like. So yeah, we look forward to sort of working with you more closely. But I think the following two sessions will be highly relevant as well, because one looks very much around how to create more user-centric technology and how to co-produce and co-design that. And then I think Tom looking at the decarb sustainability as well. And I saw one of the images had a green roof on, for example, next to the football pitch. You know, so I can see you're looking at that and building that in right from the outset. And Joanne, I don't know if you had any comments. David mentioned the partnership board. I know you're very passionate about the role of the partnership boards.
Yeah, I certainly am. It's something that I bang on about, because I think in Wales we have a really good opportunity, kind of statute wise, with some of our Welsh policy and legislation that really encourages us to work together. I don't know that across Wales we get the most out of our partnership boards. So any good examples of where those partnership boards across health, housing and social care and the wider kind of related community are coming together, I'm always really interested in hearing more about that. So David, I might contact you separately to pick your brain on that, please.
Yeah, by all means, that'd be great.
Brilliant. Well, look, amazingly, we're still more or less to time. So thanks so far for the speakers for doing so. But Charlotte, I'm going to hand over to you, and it's lovely to see you again. And this is another partnership piece of work that the LIN is doing. Actually, I'm not going to talk about it. Charlotte, it's over to you.
I was going to say, please feel free. That'll take a good few moments of the beginning of my presentation. But thank you, Jeremy, and I'll just cross the fingers and hope that my screen sharing works. Bear with me.
Thanks for stepping in at such short notice.
No problem. Absolute pleasure. Bear with me. Should be pop that onto full air. Oh, bear with me.
Yeah, we're ready.
Can I just check that's on full screen? Perfect. Thanks, Jeremy. Good afternoon, everyone. And as Jeremy's kindly introduced, I'm Charlotte Dugdale, Head of Membership Services at TSA. I think quite a few on the call may be aware of TSA or member organisations of ours, but we are the Tech Services Association, a advisory body for technology-enabled care provision, and we've been over the past good few months alongside the HousingLIN and some other organisations being involved in what we refer to as our TAPPI programme, which is the Technology for Our Ageing Population Panel for Innovation. And I'm just going to take a couple of minutes this afternoon to give some examples of some of the outcomes that we've seen moving from our kind of the principles that were set out at the beginning of the programme, and then into the delivery, and then into that really future-proofing in carrying on the lessons learned throughout the TAPPI programme and embedding that into just our future delivery of services. So the TAPPI programme has really been focused, yes, around that innovation, but bringing the overarching principles that you can see on screen here, touching on points around co-production, interoperability, preventative, with that really kind of overarching umbrella of everything, with the focus being person-centered and achieving those personalized outcomes for the individuals that we're supporting within our communities across health, housing and social care. And what the TAPPI programme really has been driving is all of those outcomes being achieved with the support of the 6 testbed sites that were really spaced out up and down the country and across the 4 nations. And you'll see there, probably recognising that Pobble is one of the testbed sites, and has really been a massive engaged testbed site throughout the whole programme. And for them, it's been a lot of learning around bringing their tech provision, but focusing on that future-proofing, really trying to look at how they scale out their tech provision, focusing on all ages across their whole range of properties and services and individuals that they're supporting at the moment. And they probably, out of all the test beds, took a little bit longer to identify the certain technologies that they wanted to purchase as part of the TAPPI programme. But that wasn't a negative thing. It's because they were really focused on making sure the elements that and the outcomes they wanted to achieve had to be identified first. So there's been some great learning from all of the other partners involved, and TSA have been really, really kind of at the forefront in working with those TAPPI testbed sites and understanding what the challenges have been. And part of the challenges is then what has helped us shape, alongside HousingLIN and our partners at Co-Production Works and the Cambridge Centre for Housing and Planning Research, think about actually what are those then outputs that can need to be developed from the programme that then start to really drive that shared learning and that power of shared learning. Because I think sometimes we get into as we all do in the day-to-day delivery of our own services, it's difficult, isn't it, to then take that step back and think, how can we do this as a, a shared approach and get this message out? So that's what we're hoping to do with some of the tangible outputs from the programme. Just touching on delivering in partnership with the test beds, in covering some of those key points that I've mentioned. So co-production, for example, is really being weaved through each of the test bed sites. So, for example, Pobble have, had and identified their tenant champions and also their staff champions, and that's where we've seen co-production really come into the fold, in having those voices from the very beginning in those discussions, and making sure that every decision throughout the TAPPI programme has been focused on the voices from our TAPPI champions. And it's just part of that is learning as well. Co-production can be challenging and difficult. It's not an easy task to do. So it's lessons learned around that and how to create a co-production strategy, and then embedding that into future service delivery. And that's something all different business areas within organizations can look at embedding. One of the key elements that has really been identified throughout the partnership is that mindset change and culture change away from technology-led procurement, for example, or decision making into outcomes focused. And I think that's something we all talk about wanting to achieve, and how we put that into actual practice is a challenge in itself, isn't it? And I think that's where, if we again take the test bed sites, they've really seen it hit some obstacles and barriers of how to get their full workforce engaged, especially those that maybe are felt like their digital skills, for example, weren't as strong as some of their colleagues. So there's been a lot of a focus on creating that outcomes focused, but through the work of that workforce development approach as well, and utilising tools, for example, the TSA's virtual house. So Pobble and the other testbed sites have had access to the virtual house platform to help raise those skills and raise those awareness skills of technology-enabled care and innovation across their whole workforce, to try and break those barriers and increase referrals, for example, or look at actually how can I understand what the barriers to adoption are, to then try and put in a plan to mitigate the risk of hitting some of those barriers. So it's been a real big focus on several different areas throughout the programme. Supporting outcomes through enabling solutions. So this comes back to a lot of the elements of co-production throughout the TAPPI programme over these past few months have been identifying the needs as part of their kind of initial assessment. So what are the needs of our workforce, of our service and organisation, and of course the individuals that we're supporting within the community. And that the needs have been, yes, linked to certain types of technology. So how can we track hydration levels and monitoring through technology? But it's also then looking at how can we look at the evidence data collected by technology on the health and well-being of our individuals, but also the property themselves, and bringing that overarching data together. So there's been lots of learning, and this is just a real snapshot of some of the different areas. So you can see on there testing robotic vacuums, for example. But this is really, like I say, a snapshot of all of the outcomes in assessments and needs that can be addressed, and they have been through the TAPPI programme. And then it's then how we then share this out to also look at, well, what are some other areas that haven't been yet identified but could be, as we take this approach and just embed it into our normal day-to-day delivery. And finally, it's about embedding the policy in the practice. And I think this is the real critical element. Thinking about all of this shared learning and shared outcomes that we're hearing today, on today's session, and from our perspective at TSA and HousingLIN through the TAPPI programme, it's then thinking about, well, how can we use these as drivers to force change across health, housing and social care, and more specifically for today across housing. So we can see, for example, where we know sometimes innovation can be challenged is through procurement. And we know the consortium procurement tender is one example to reference, has actually embedded the TAPPI principles as one of their practices within their framework, and asked potential bidders to put in evidence of how they, as an organisation, meet the principles is part of their response. So it's thinking about how we utilise, whether that's frameworks and looking at our technical specifications, but bringing in that outcomes focused and scenario based, driving, you know, our solution providers and suppliers across the sector to just think differently. I think will be a mountain that will be hard to overcome, but if we can say, well, it's worked well in, you know, across TAPPI and across POBL, how do we then use that as driver for change? I think will be really critical. And then just fundamentally, some of the most other areas is around, you know, without reading every point on screen here, but about connectivity. We've seen that, we know that's a massive area, and how can we push that need for connectivity, you know, becoming that social tariff for supported housing. So I think it's just that evidence, it's the examples that where it can be done, how can we deploy it on a wider scale? So as I've mentioned, lots of learning from the TAPPI programme across all of the testbed sites. TSA have learned a lot, and I'm sure the HousingLIN will be able to say the same. And we're looking at now from the tangible outputs that are going to be around guidance and checklists, you know, really making sure that they get into the hands of anyone that would find them beneficial. So they're being finalised at the moment, and will be finished and hopefully launched within the next few weeks. And then I'm sure between TSA and HousingLIN we'll be making sure that all of our members and the wider organisations have access to those documents, and hopefully we'll find benefit in them. But happy to take any questions later on, and my details will be on the end of the slides here when they're shared, for any conversations that anyone would like to have about developing your own tech strategies, your own innovations you're looking at, and if, you know, from a TSA we can support with any of your conversations. Thank you, Jeremy, and I'll pass back to you.
Charlotte, that was great, and I think you hit the nail on the head. So the digital maturity, both across those 6 sites, but also more broadly across the sector, varies so much. And you know, whether it's operationalising it around various tests that we're doing, or whether it's about how to make this embedded within strategic operational delivery plans, or at board level, these are really important things that POBL and the others are taking forward, and some great learning that's coming out. And so, thanks ever so for giving a snapshot on that. I'm going to move on. Joanne, is that all right, unless you had a couple of words? Yeah, okay. And invite Tom. Tom, thanks very much for coming in and stepping in as well, although you've had a bit longer notice. I know Ed and I have been talking about this area for some time, but I also think it fits in very neatly with that design and tech element about how it fits into the other two earlier presentations as well. So a nice segue over to you. So thanks very much for your support.
No problem. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm a little bit of a newbie to the HousingLIN sort of circus, but I'm glad to be here. And yeah, grateful, Jeremy, for your invitation. And I completely agree with you. It fits in nicely with what's been discussed and presented already today. So my name's Tom Boom. I'm head of technical innovation and climate at Clwyd Allen Housing Association. I didn't choose my title. It was one of those things which it just sort of was there before I got here. But I'm pleased to talk about sort of our journey on the decarb pursuits, and also some innovative technology that we're looking at, particularly when we're looking at sustainable living. So just to set a bit of a background in terms of the UK. So within the UK, 40% of carbon emissions come from households. That's both considering the construction and the use of those homes. So in efforts to minimise, that's according to the Climate Change Committee. So in efforts to minimise these emissions, we're looking at reducing embodied carbon. That's within the materials of the properties, the construction, including the transport to site, etc., where the materials are sourced and components are sourced, is important, but also operational carbon. So that's what's used within the heating, the power, the waste of properties. And we are on a journey. You can see a couple of little diagrams there. They're not my own, but it gives you an idea of where we've come from 1990 moving forward towards 2030, and just how much reduction in tons of CO2 produced by each property as we shows how far we've come, but also how far we have to go. So that's a little bit about the sort of background in the wider context. But in terms of Clwyd Allen, as a housing association, we own around 6,800 homes spread across North and into Mid Wales. So we have a wide range of facilities, so care homes, extra care, supported living, sheltered housing, women's refuge. The list goes on and on. So that the scale of our challenge is to the tune of about 120 million if we're looking at achieving net zero by 2050. That is quite a daunting prospect, daunting numbers in terms of the timelines, but also the cost involved in. But every journey I've put there, every journey begins with a single step. So we've been looking at our first steps and how that fits into our wider strategy. So within our strategy, we build we hand over approximately 200 houses each year. So there's around 500 on site any one time. So in an effort to reduce the embodied carbon, we look at things like a timber frame. We have some contractors that use all Welsh timber, of course, fairly locally sourced, but also constructed off-site to reduce the time spent off-site and wasted time in terms of those things wasted to the elements, and you're at the mercy of wind and rain, etc. But also looking at locally sourced materials in terms of the timber. The property on the bottom right there, that stone is sourced from within 10 miles from the site. Just looking at the responsibly sourced materials and locality if we can. We're looking at using recycled bottles in the bitumen for the tarmac, but also eliminating things. So with concrete, there's lots of it's very, very carbon intensive manufacture, especially of those of curbs, etc. So we're looking at just little site practices which help to reduce our embodied carbon of each scheme. So when we look at operational carbon, we built an EPC A rating, which in turn determines a very low heating demand. So that when I say super insulated, that each of the timber panels are filled with natural insulation, but then also have a wood fiber insulation on the outside. That insulation layer continues underneath the foundations, almost like a warm blanket around it all. So again, very, very well insulated to keep the warm in and the heat out when needed, but also the reverse when during the summer periods. And then after all those things, we look at energy generation and storage. So whether it's solar PV and battery storage, I think David mentioned about all off gas, which is what we build to as well. So predominantly we use air source heat pumps. We have used communal air source heat pump as well. So we also build to a standard called lifetime homes. Now this I think is a great initiative which allows, or the purpose of it is to allow a resident to remain in the same property for as long as they choose, basically. So when we talk about this, when you walk into one of our properties, you probably won't notice much of a difference, but lots of things are considered almost behind the scenes at build stage. So you can see there on the right hand side, that's Lizzie. Within Lizzie's property, which is behind her, the only change that's been made to the property is a stair lift has been installed. All of the door widths are wide enough for her to access through with a wheelchair. You can see that the threshold is level access. There's all kinds of things considering the lifetime of, for Lizzie to stay the lifetime of within her home. So the walls in bathrooms are reinforced with plywood behind the plasterboard. There's the joist structure within the dining area allows for a through floor lift, and lots of other considerations which are taken at the build stage or pre-build, which allows for the planning and the livability of those homes sort of long term. So when it comes to the new build, it's fairly straightforward. a lot of my time is spent on the retrofit, as we call it, of our existing stock. So that's making our existing properties much more livable, both here and now and into the future. So that we have a lot of aging stock in terms of our homes that we manage and own, and each one has individual issues, whether it's the location, whether it's the age of the property, even how it's been used over the years. So our sort of determining process, we looked at first of all, the EPC is the energy efficiency rating. So we started with the worst first, and there is different pots of funding for those available. But we've also looked to replace LPG and oil boilers. Those properties that have those boilers are now off the LPG and oil. We haven't just installed, an air source heat pump. We've coupled that with installation measures and solar PV and batteries on occasion as well. It was really key for us to not just have and I think this is echoed in what David said as well, not just have a building centered approach, but we work with the housing teams almost like a referral basis for a more person centered approach as well. So if someone is struggling to heat their home, then they're encouraged to get in touch, obviously, and hopefully know about those people, so we can help them, whether it's in education or in directing them to certain pots of funding, but also we look at how we can help them in terms of upgrading their properties. And we've this year with the Optimised Retrofit programme from Welsh Government, we've upgraded 79 properties, both again the person-centred and home-centred approaches. So the regulatory requirement under the new WHQS, I know it was mentioned earlier, is to achieve a SAP rating, which is, you can see on the bar chart on the right hand side there, of 75, which is a mid-C on the EPC rating by 2030, focusing on fabric measures first. So as I mentioned, the fabric measures are important. Our sort of approach is to help residents reduce their energy demand, to focus on fabric measures, and then look at the decarbonisation in terms of low carbon technologies. So we've been installing solar PV and batteries, along with upgrading insulation, both the loft and walls, and installing air source heat pumps to replace quite inefficient electric storage heaters. So one particular project in Bentlech on Anglesey was a group of 20 bungalows, over 55s accommodation, but it wasn't all plain sailing, and we learned a lot of lessons on the way through. One of them is resident education, and the involvement from residents is key. We chose to rebrand them resident conversations rather than consultations, to bring residents on the journey with us rather than sort of tell them what's going to happen. So you can see a couple of the examples there. We invited the suppliers of the new tech down to explain the technologies and also engage with residents early on. We had the contractors there as well, and tried to have a much more personalised approach. Support was required throughout the process, both pre-works, during the works, and it's now ongoing sort of post-works. But also we're developing resident information booklets, etc., to help in those sorts of processes. Lots of lessons learned, and much too many to go through on this in these slides. But just to mention some of the innovations which we've installed. We've installed environmental sensors along with energy clamps. So this is a company called IOPT. So what appears on our dashboard is what you can see on the screen here. Lots of numbers, lots of squiggly lines there. But basically, it shows us the humidity, temperature, and carbon dioxide levels within habitable rooms. This isn't to monitor the residents' usage or to see, how often they're breathing or whatever it might be. But this helps to show us just when it comes to damp and mold risk. If the temperature gets too low and the humidity too high, you can see on the left-hand side there that some at medium risk. When that goes to high risk, when the dew point is almost reached, that will alert us to sort of make an inquiry to see whether the resident is struggling to heat their home, or whether they're choosing to heat it that way, or maybe encourage them to increase the ventilation in the area. It just helps us to see how they're using their home, and the resident sees this information as well to use the home more efficiently as well. Coupled with the environmental sensors, we have energy clamps on the you can see there that the colours, the mains electric coming in, the PV production, and how much the air source heat pump is using. So these sort of dashboards and metrics help us to help the residents to make more informed choices about their energy usage. It gives them an idea of how much things are going to cost them in advance, and also how much they're sort of saving by using the PV and also the battery backup. Just to whiz through, I'm short on time. We're looking at smart hot water cylinders from Mixergy. I think these slides are going to be shared anyway, but basically these cylinders heat the hot water from the top down rather than the bottom up, as usual, and you basically only heat what you need, heat the hot water that you need rather than the whole cylinder at once. So there's a couple of nifty gadgets on the side there which learn how you use your hot water and will only heat to what's needed, which is massively reduces the energy required. But also we're beginning to install, and it's taken a little while, but infrared radiant wallpaper, which sounds pretty sci-fi, but basically there's a heating element which has graphene in it with electric current passed over it, and that allows that gives off infrared, which heats objects rather than space. So you can see some infrared images there. Working with a company called NextGen, the objects within a space are heated first before the air, which makes it much more efficient. You feel it within sort of 10-20 minutes rather than a radiator, which a traditional wet central heating system, should I say, which will take a lot longer to heat the whole space, heat the whole room, and then you end up turning it off to try and save on energy. But then you have that flip-flop effect. Air source heat pumps work on a continual sort of background level of comfort. So this is just something which we're trialing in a few properties to start with, and to learn lessons how to install, etc., to use in the most efficient way, but something which we're quite positive about moving forward. And then the future is I put the future is green because there's lots of things going on. I won't mention them in too much detail, but there's AirX, which is automated air bricks, which obviously control ventilation under the floor of properties. Vericon systems. So Vericon is a company which has like a lot of testing equipment which is remotely controlled. So automatic boiler testing, you can top up the pressure on a boiler and monitor the usage, etc., which is really helpful, especially when you have residents who aren't sure how to get the best use of the systems. There's Switchy, which we're looking at in terms of interactive thermostats that gives the residents options to interact with us through their thermostat. SoulShare, which we're looking at on larger buildings with a communal solar photovoltaic array. That allows, it's an inverter which separates the electric into lots of different properties within the same building. We're looking at wind-powered housing schemes, and then lots of different options for lots of green options, if you want to call it that, for all housing types. So that's the end of my presentation. Apologies for the fly through, but hopefully you got an idea of just what we're doing and the options and possibilities out there. Sorry for taking so long.
That was brilliant. No, that was absolutely brilliant, and I think Joanne agrees. Some really rich material there as well, and information that even I, somebody who's worked in this sector for a long time, wasn't aware of. And so you've really helped me on my learning curve this afternoon, and it blends in with others. Joanne, do you have any comments?
I think that one in particular, I've obviously scribbled comments as we've been going through, but that one in particular, firstly, I wanted to say welcome to the circus, Tom. That's how you introduced your session. But I think what I thought of was actually we talk about decarbonisation often as a separate subject. We know that it applies to all of our properties. We don't have many conversations about it, detailed conversations about it, as part of our steering group. So I have made a note of that. So thank you very much, Tom. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I think the thing that struck me was, it's also, the issue is not just about new build, it's also retrofitting as well. And so you've got big challenges for your existing stock, as well as looking at the new developments you're doing, whether it's mainstream or specialist supported or older persons accommodation. So again, something perhaps we can explore if we've got time later, but moving on into 2024 with your participation in the big top now. So thanks ever so, Tom. We're going to take a comfort break now, and we're going to be then joined by Gary, Alan, and Sean. We're going to probably move a little bit away from the sort of the physical build side and look much more at the home and the community, and build on that sort of conversations that the four speakers this afternoon have already talked about. Engaging with residents and better understanding of those needs and aspirations. Could I ask if people could get back here by 4:15 at the latest, and I'll ask Sally if she can just put the agenda up for this last part of the session, our second half, as I referred to earlier, and we'll then kick off with Gary, and then Alan, and I think it is Sean. Yes, I think I got that right. Here we are. Okay, so just slightly running over. So if we get back by 4:15, just turn your screens off and you'll keep on mute, and we'll let you know when we're back. Right, well, welcome back. I hope everybody's suitably refreshed. Gary, do you have some slides, or are you just talking from the head?
No, I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. Bear with me.
Yeah, no, please do. No, while I'm sort of doing the intros, why don't you do so? And Joanne, have you got anything you want to kick off with?
Okay, can you see that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Lovely, okay.
Well, Gary, can I welcome you, and thanks very much for joining us this afternoon. And I know you've got lots going on as well.
Yes, something along those lines. Okay, so thank you, Jeremy, and good afternoon, everyone. I've kind of been given a kind of grand title of testing out different solutions to strengthen age-inclusive communities, and I think what I probably ought to do is confess, first of all, that we are at the very early stages of this. And I think whilst those of us that provide extra care housing are probably actually very good at organising and arranging activities and things that go on within extra care housing, it's a bigger challenge to explore ways in which we can engage with the wider community. And so we've begun to talk about that. We've begun to explore ways in which we can engage the wider community. And what I wanted to do was share with you two approaches. One really that came out of, I suppose, adversity, first of all, and then a second, which is more around our planned programme and our partnership with the University of South Wales. So to kick off, what I wanted to do was talk about our extra care service in Bridgend. So this development is about 4 years old. It comprises of an extra care scheme, which you can see some pictures here. Alongside this development, it includes some bungalows, and then if you have a look in the background, it also includes some general needs housing. And this development was completed in around about 2020. The extra care scheme is a little bit different because we have 15 residential care beds within the building that is run by the local authority, 25 extra care units, and then bungalows and 20 general needs houses on the site. At the same time, what was also developed here was a new school and a new college. And what became apparent fairly recently was a growing issue and a growing problem with the school run that actually resulted in some coverage on BBC News. And I'm hoping this link's going to work. Bear with me. I don't think that link's going to work. So long. Oh, hold on. Is that doing it now? No. Okay. I will talk you through it. So essentially what happened was back at back end of last year, beginning of this year, we were confronted with a news article around residents from the extra care scheme, from the bungalows and from the general needs housing, basically blocking the access to the estate because there were real issues around safety, lots of parents dropping children off, creating parking, health and safety concerns around for the people that lived on that estate. And to the point that we had a physical barrier at one point of residents sat on chairs across the entrance to the estate to stop parents delivering their children to school. So we decided to actually use this as an opportunity to try and engage with the school specifically around the issues and concerns of residents. What we felt was useful, I don't think there was a clear understanding by the school, both by staff and by the parents of the children going to the school, around exactly what it was that we delivered on the site. And we invited them across to the scheme to actually come and see what we do, understand the nature of the service that we provide. We talked to the school about the relative merits of inviting pupils over as well, and actually run some events to be able to engage with pupils, to really kind of invite them into events that our residents were putting on, but also to get them to put on events as well, to try and begin to knit those two groups of people together. And we have on the estate, in any event, as a consequence of the bungalows and with the general needs housing, we have quite a close-knit community there in terms of people coming to the scheme as events are put on. So actually what we were able to do was to start a conversation amongst the people who lived on the estate, amongst pupils and amongst parents, to be able to kind of understand exactly what was being delivered there. I have to confess, you know, we engage with some, but not all parents. There were some that still create some issues. But what we have found is really some advantage in terms of really since the beginning of the autumn term in September, we've had far fewer issues as a result of engaging people and bringing them in and getting them to understand what it is we deliver and why it's important we keep access clear for emergency vehicles and that kind of thing. And we have the beginnings of a very good working relationship with the school and its pupils, who now routinely engage with one another across the services. So that kind of felt like a really positive example of really taking what could have been a very negative news story and to begin to turn that into something a bit more positive around the relationship we have with that school and the pupils within it. I think then really the bit of work we're exploring now and that we've started is really around a partnership arrangement we have with the University of South Wales, and this is with the School of Psychology. And so this started or begun life back in 2021. We developed a memorandum of understanding with the psychology faculty in November 21. And we've begun to explore the broad range of projects that we might be able to utilise students and their studies to deliver services and really kind of research information and inform some of our strategic decisions about kind of what we do and where we deliver it. And whilst I've listed the broad range of projects on here, what I would primarily draw your attention to is kind of three aspects really. So one is around the music therapy and we've delivered two years now of music therapy into both our nursing and extra care housing. And as a consequence of doing that, what we've actually been able to do is begin to work on developing the relationships with the students concerned, they have come back as volunteers into the schemes to begin to maintain and routinely continue these therapy sessions within both nursing care and extra care, and build on the work of the new influx of students year on year. So we have a growing programme and a growing relationship between the students at the university and the residents within our nursing care and within our extra care. I think the other area that we have developed is around befriending services. And again, it's around building some intergenerational relationships between younger people and older people. And as part of the curriculum within the School of Psychology, they offer up volunteering opportunities. And again, what we've been able to do is to utilise student time and their willingness to volunteer to be able to develop a befriending services to our residents living in both nursing and extra care housing. And that is now a routine part of the programme that the university offers up to be able to offer befriending and befriending opportunities within nursing and extra care housing. And then I guess the two larger pieces of work which have recently been completed, and we're hoping to try and get the reports on these in the early part of the new year, is really around understanding how residents engage with activities, and specifically how male residents engage with activities. So this was really around exploring two aspects. One was around, given the challenges, particularly post-COVID, into trying to break down some barriers around reluctance to engage, around fear of engagement, around participating out into the community again. We actually commissioned 2 master's projects to explore how we get people to engage more. And there's some really interesting messages coming out of this work now around the things that we need to consider as a provider to try and ensure that people feel safe, that the range of activities offered are broad enough to interest people. So there were some very significant messages there from some residents around, for example, bingo's okay, but it's not for me, and I need something more engaging than this. And so we were able to kind of begin to tease out some of the things that might be. And what was really interesting around the male engagement project was that most of our staff working within extra care are female. And so there were some barriers, and this focused on the RCT area, the Rhondda Cynon Taf area, which is a traditional area of heavy industry mining, and it's fair to say males within extra care did not feel that they could necessarily engage with activities because they were primarily being led by female staff. They actually wanted to engage and have the opportunity to engage more with male staff. And so again, the details of this we're just waiting for, but again, it will begin to kind of help us develop and shape our strategy around resident engagement going forward, because we've got to begin to think about that more in the future. So in summary, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are really at the very early stages of this. We recognise that we've got to do more around utilising extra care in a broader way within the community to really begin to open it up, and to explore ways that we can work more broadly across the generations, and certainly given our intended merger with Pobble in the future, we're going to have a broader base upon which we can do that as well. So early doors for us, but that just hopefully gives you some insight into some of the things that we're doing, and hopefully I'll be able to tell you a bit more about our approach to this in the future, particularly around utilising the master's research projects into shaping some of the things we do in the future. So thank you for that, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Well, Gary, thank you very much. And some of the work you're doing there, we would love to capture as a HousingLIN blog by some of your PhD students or staff who are working closely with them. But also it touches on some of the other work that LIN's done in the past and conversations we've had with others around psychologically informed environments, you know, and what you've brought in here is that therapeutic community through singing, through behaviour, you know, and how you unlock some of that. And that's really encouraging. Joanne, do you have any points that you want to draw attention to?
Yes, yeah, I was interested. Look, Gary and I have spoken about the partnership with the University of South Wales, and I know that the School of Psychology did a community housing Cymru session, a spotlight session last week, and I think for the housing sector in particular, it's really positive. I know that there's a really strong evidence base around linkages between housing and physical health. There is less of an evidence base, I think, when we are talking about well-being. And I think post-COVID, we are talking about well-being much more. Welsh policy talks about well-being, but that evidence base can still be lacking. And quite often we rely on anecdotal kind of good news stories, but you can't quite capture where it's come from, where the measurement is. So I think anything that kind of strengthens the work that collectively we do has got to be a positive thing. So thank you very much, Gary.
Right, let's move on to Alan. Alan, I don't know if you sing, but I know that you speak so eloquently, and we're really looking forward to your presentation. And also on behalf of LIN, thanks for Bronafon's support over the years. So yeah, over to you.
Thanks, Jeremy, and you've just had an extra layer of pressure on me from saying that. I feel a bit of an imposter because I can see that I'm surrounded by real experts in this area, but and as a chief exec, it's I'm not necessarily an expert on every part of what we do, but I'm here to talk really specifically about one of our older person schemes, Glanwern House. And in particular, the important lessons that we learned about how to talk to our older residents about changes in their schemes. We thought as an organisation that we were fairly engaged with our communities. We're a community-based RSL, and we thought we were pretty good at engaging with our communities and adopting a person-centered approach and so on. And there's plenty of evidence that we are. We do that stuff really well. But when we embarked on a review of our older persons provision back in 2017, 2018, we didn't get that engagement right. Sally, if you could just take us down to the next slide, please. And yeah, as I say, we started on a review in 2017-18. I should say that Bronavon is a community-based LSVT based in Torfaen in the South Wales. We're the first sort of mining valley that you come across as you're going east to west. In Wales, we own about 8,000 homes. We transferred in 2008, so we're 15 years old. Now, about 10 years old at the time we started thinking about the need to improve our older persons offering. We have 35 schemes, mostly built in the 60s, between the 60s and the 80s. And we house through our older persons, our retirement provision, we call it retirement housing, around 900 residents. It's tired, to be frank. A lot of the stock needs refreshing, but it is still popular. And we did an exercise to review, what properties needed, what schemes needed investment in 2017-18, and actually we looked at it far too much through the wrong lens, and actually that's what set us off on the wrong track in many ways, because we looked at it as a property, and this is a cardinal, and you will know this is a sort of cardinal sin, but we looked at it very much through a property lens rather than a people lens, and that's one of the key lessons that we learned. So we got the conversation off on the wrong start. We had a false start on this. It quickly got political and resulted in questions both in the Senate and at the House of Commons as well, when we talked about potentially closing 4 schemes in particular, those 4 schemes that we identified as needing particular attention, and that included the most kind of tired scheme, if you like, which is Glanwern House. So if you come on to the next slide, please. Yeah. So we sort of stepped back from that sort of bruising experience and sort of realized that we needed a bit of a rethink. I remember calling you, Jeremy, to talk about how can we get our approach right. We set up a panel of the wise, and forgive me, I can't remember what we called the panel at the time, but it was a panel including Jeremy and also the Commissioner for Older People in Wales as well, Helena Herklots, to help us focus on how we can start the conversation again. And we hit upon this sort of co-design approach, and which makes perfect sense, of course. So, and in relation to Glanwern, we started to talk to them about what was important to them, and what was key was that residents wanted to stay in their scheme. They were happy with the homes, even though we were saying that they needed serious investment. And they became, as we restarted the conversation, became more interested in exploring redesign, and then also opening up the opportunity to bring new homes to the site. One of the complaints that residents in the scheme had was that Glanwern is sort of in a bit of a geographical island that's cut off from the rest of the community. And when we started to talk about the opportunity to build new homes, there was interest in this because it would enable a sort of re-engagement with the rest of the community. We can go on to the next slide, please, Sally. Thank you. So we started a different sort of conversation, asking the questions: what was possible? Crucially, obviously, what was important to the people that lived in Glanwern House, and then also explored what opportunities might emerge, and that's how we landed upon a redesign of the scheme, and also taking the opportunity of building new homes, about 10 new homes within the curtilage of the scheme. So we agreed some proposals, improvements, big improvements to the existing building, access to the communal garden, which had previously been sort of a little bit closed. It wasn't easy to get into the communal garden, balconies to give to make the most of the views over the garden and the locality beyond. And then a programme of improvements to the garden area, including encouraging keen gardeners within the scheme to get involved in those improvements. A new hub accessible by existing and new tenants as well was a key. When we talked about that as an opportunity, that was a really key new feature for the residents there. To enable some of this, we needed to demolish the older part of the scheme and refurbish. So we were going to refurbish the existing property. So the scheme was sort of set up as a sort of L-shaped design that with about 20 in the longest part of the L, 20 flats in the longest part of the L, and 5 in the shorter part of the L. which were, and that part of the scheme in particular was the bit that needed most reinvestment. So we demolished 5 of the flats and the shorter part of the L, if you like, and then and also the communal lounge in the older building. So at this point, the scheme was without a communal area. And then, as I say, we built 10 new general needs, or we are building 10 new general needs properties on the site. We go on to the next scheme, please. Next slide. So, what, as I say, what we've done as we restarted the conversation and have continued in that, and continue the discussion with our residents in that vein of talking about what's possible, including improvements to the garden and the locality, replanting trees around the locality as well, improving facilities, responding to people when they said and were really clear about what it was that they needed. One of the results of it has been that tenants have been really patient with us and the contractors whilst the new properties have been built, because as you can imagine, we've asked tenants to live in what is a building site for the duration of the project. So work on the block has started, and what's been great is that it includes installation of intelligent energy systems along the lines that we were hearing about earlier on in some of the other schemes that we were discussing. New patio doors, cavity installation, improvement to the roof, and improvements to the property as well in terms of insulation as well. So we're partway through the project, and the project is due to be completed in March 2024. So if you go on to the next slide, thanks, Ali. So what has worked, and bear in mind what we're learning from this is going to inform our revisit to our older person strategy. So as I said earlier on, there was a false start. We paused delivery of the strategy. COVID came along, and that pause has gone on longer than we expected, but we are now revisiting that. And the lessons that we've learned in Glamworm will really inform our entire approach. So what worked well, the design ideas from residents came through, and when we were able to incorporate those into the scheme itself, clearly, we were able to demonstrate that we were listening to what residents have said, and that's obviously a key part of this. And that difficult thing of living on a building site in essence, because of the work that's gone into the discussion with residents, that has meant that what could potentially have been really difficult has been easier, touch wood so far, despite the fact that there's, as I say, the site itself is quite confined and difficult for people to move around. What didn't work so well, and a lesson for us, is that having got rid of the communal space, actually we didn't have an area to have, sensible I was going to say consultation meetings. Actually, were the conversations about the future of the scheme. So we could manage that. We would have managed that slightly differently, or we would do it differently in hindsight. And that sort of, there was a bit of an effect in terms of during the middle part of the project where we weren't finding the opportunity to keep in touch with people. And again, a really, really key thing for us, a key lesson for us, is the importance of, once established, really keeping up that communication, keeping up that conversation, almost over communicating. If we go to the next slide, please, Sally. I'm nearly there on this. So what we do again, consultation, as I said earlier on, picking up on people's ideas. The energy efficiency measures will be an important benefit for tenants. And the improvements of the communal gardens, that's already showing in terms of greater well-being for residents, people being able to access the space more easily and enjoying the space as well. What we won't do again, well, I talked about the communal lounge, and perhaps, if this was possible, to start the hub sooner to create this, once we got rid of the communal space, to create something that replicates it in some way. So what started off as a difficult conversation, I'm pleased to say we've turned it round, and the relationships now between ourselves are good. What people at the scheme are really hopeful about is, through the design of the scheme, we're able to create that permeability within to the rest of the wider community, which I think will go down well with residents. I'm conscious of time, so I'll stop there, and hopefully that's given you a sense of what we've learned through what started off as a difficult process. Thank you.
Well, Alan, thank you. And as you say, it started off difficult, but how you turn it and the learning that you as an organisation have had, but also the continual engagement with residents as well. I think so the danger is having communication fatigue. You think you've done it, actually it is about how you constantly poll, and something that I think is really important. So, Joanne, before we go over to Shana, any sort of comments you'd like to make or observations from Alan's slot?
Fine, Jeremy. I was just going to commend Alan to say, look, we've all got things wrong, but to turn around something, of that scale and magnitude and turn it into a positive that then informs thinking for the rest of the stock, I think that's a massive achievement.
Well, look, we're going to move on then to our final guest, Sian from United Welsh. Quite a few of you today have already in your presentations talked about wellness, about well-being, quality of life, improvements, making an impact. And here's somebody who's got living well in her job title. So Sian, tell us how to live well and what you do, how brilliant stuff that United Welsh are doing.
Oh, thanks very much for that introduction, Jeremy. Can everybody see the screen? Yeah, great. Like Jeremy says, I've got living well in my job title, and I look after the older person stock at United Welsh, which is extra care and sheltered Cat 1 and Cat 2. When I was putting this presentation together, I wanted to talk very broadly about building resilient care at home and drop in a few things that we do at United Welsh, because I think it doesn't just cover sheltered and extra care. This obviously covers people in their own homes, and certainly what we've been finding recently, which leads me on to the next slide, is what is vitally important, no matter, for some reason I'm not able to move on to the next slide. There we go. One of the things that we've been finding with people coming into our properties is that person-centred planning is absolutely key in terms of building sustainability. And I think it's key from whatever tenure people are living in. We find that people take longer to make a decision about whether they want to accept one of our properties, because it can sometimes be a massive thing for them to leave maybe their lifelong home and come into one of ours. So we try to personalise our service and work in a person-centred way, whilst recognising, the impact to somebody moving on into one of our properties. Which leads me on to, obviously, person-centred planning is vitally important, but what else goes into building sustainability and resilience within the home? We're undergoing at the moment a user-centred design review of our Living Well service, and something that's come out very clearly across our Category 1 and Category 2 sites is that family and friends and neighbours are really key, that they're a huge support. Mainly in Category 1s where there's probably less staff provision. and there's a real community feel. So I do think that community is really key. Having the right care coming in as well is absolutely key. We see where that works well, how the person can flourish, and we see that sometimes where it doesn't work so well, how the outcomes of that person aren't so great. Right tech at the right time. We're also, as I'm sure many of you are, going through our digitalisation process at the moment. And when we took it into one of our category 2 schemes, we brought a provider in and said this is what they want to offer, everybody wanted something different. There wasn't a consensus. Some people said they would like some of the tech that goes with it, like an app or a wearable. Other people were like, I don't want to be contacted at all. So there was real differences in what people want. And obviously, if you're coming from a person-centered way of planning this, it's got to be the right tech at the right time. And I think knowing and understanding what people need and regularly reviewing that, because people's needs change. And that can often be a roller coaster with some people. Sometimes they will need more care, sometimes they will need less care. So it's making sure that you're putting that proper planning in place. And that leads on to kind of the understanding the changing needs. I mean, as we all know, our population is getting older. As in the next 20 to 30 years, the needs of the people coming through are going to be different than they are now, potentially. They're going to be more people without that support network that we've mentioned, family, friends and neighbours. So it's really important that we think ahead as well with building resilient care at home, that we're forward planning and we're adapting our services to change our needs. Certainly at United Welsh, what we're thinking about is not just what our residents are telling us they want now and what they would like from our service, but we're thinking about actually what's it going to look like in the future. So, you know, if we do any future reviews, that they're not massive, that we're adapting as we go along and that we're flexible in our approach. So tech, we've talked about that, and tech does help. It helps the provider, family and friends monitoring health, tracking movements, keeping in touch, medication reminders. And something that was mentioned and I think is key is that well-being is not always necessarily monitored in the way that we would like. We have a Connect service within Living Well, which provides health and well-being activities to all of our residents, and we are looking at how we're measuring wellbeing outcomes now, because we think that's vitally important. It's in actually making sure that we're giving those right activities to the right people at the right time. For the person receiving the care, obviously, it can enable independence, can be tailored to meet people's needs. It's good at keeping in touch, and increased safety in the home is also really, really important. And it enables people to live in their home for longer, whether that's in social housing or in their own home. But we have the tech to build it. But there's always an assumption that providing tech for people to remain independent at home is a good thing. And it is. However, is the person surviving or thriving? If care at home means less human contact, which can lead to loneliness and isolation, it could diminish someone's resilience and not enhance or sustain it. We've all probably seen, AI is big on the agenda, isn't it? And I mean, I went to a tech fair and they were talking about how AI could assist with, care in the home, and how it could, read all sorts of things about a person's daily movements, etc. But that could mean less human contact. And is that what people want? Some of us are extroverts, some of us are introverts, but we all do need at some point some form of human interaction. And it should be of value and meaningful as part of the person's care plan. So there should be consideration about actually how often do I want to see people? What's important to me? Who's important to me? One of the things that we're doing at the moment is looking at adapting a document for our extra care, and if it works, rolling it out to our Cat 2 site. So this is me. So it's something that the NHS do on dementia wards, but we're going to kind of adapt it to be suitable for our residents. And it will talk about how do people wish to be known? Are they Mrs. Moores, Miss? What's their name might be Catherine, but they might want you to call them Cat. It's all what's their favourite you know, type of food, or how do they like their tea, and things like that. All sorts of things that are very personalised, that will help with building resilience at home. Something that I was talking to one of my colleagues about, whose mum actually had dementia and has recently gone into a home, is about keeping up the skills. With care, it can be quite easy to do things for people because it's easier and they might take a bit longer, but de-skilling is a risk factor with care. And we should encourage even small tasks, you know, rather than, you know, if you pop round to see somebody, rather than saying, oh, I'll make the cup of tea, you sit there. If they want to get up and make it, allow them to do it, answering the door, that kind of thing. Even small tasks can help build physical and emotional resilience and enable people to live at home for longer. The environment, you know, we've talked a lot about some wonderful developments that are happening with outside spaces, balconies, repurposing, etc. But it's important to think about the environment for that person from their point of view. Is it fit for purpose? Is it safe for them, and does it promote their well-being? Is there a reluctance to move if they are coming into social housing? And remembering that for most people, a property is a home and not a house or a flat or a bungalow. It's where they've lived and they've got a lot of memories, and they should have the choice of decision making. We see a lot of families coming with their relatives and saying, oh, this is a wonderful flat, you should absolutely take it, and putting a lot of pressure on them to do so. But actually, is that what they want? And a few times they'll go away and then they'll phone us up and say, actually, I don't want it, because they were pressurized in that moment. And then there's the emotional support we're moving as well, and within the environment. You know, as I say, it can be very stressful for people when they are moving, and there's that continuity of care needs to come with that, and actually the feeling that you can build those relationships with people and ensure that they continue to be able to be happy and healthy at home. But ultimately, feedback as to what works and doesn't shouldn't come from data alone. We get a lot of data. You know, we're very data driven as, you know, as a sector, but care should be flexible and adapt to the person's changing needs. We're all individuals and we're all unique, and everybody deserves to be able to have a say and to speak up and to be healthy and happy at home and resilient. So I hope that's okay. So that's me done. Whistle stop tour there.
Oh, well, that was fantastic, and really sort of captures everything that we've been talking about and brings it together really neatly, and sort of segues to many of the other presentations. So that was really skillfully done. So thank you. And I, for a moment I thought that was Alan's dog barking, but I think you have a puppy, so it may well have been yours. But
oh, Jeremy, they've been quiet all afternoon, and the minute that I do the presentation, they start kicking off.
Yeah, well, you know, we had this the other day with Alan, and unfortunately mine's fast asleep. So that's the life. And, you know, welcome to the HousingLIN Canine Club as well. So, Joanne, can I pass over to you for sort of just a quick thought of any of the Q&As that you think we may want to touch on before we close?
Sorry, I'm doing this on my phone, so I'm just.
Well, I mean, Julian raised a really important thing. You know, the extra care is not just about the bricks and mortar; it's also about the social. But he asked, you know, talk about today's social rented, or have any market rental or purchased properties included in any of your schemes? We've probably talked a little bit more about the social rented. David, I don't know whether you or Tom, yours covers across other tenure groups as well.
No, sorry, all ours are socially rented.
Yeah.
Just.
And Sean, there's a question for you about, do United Welsh offer housing first provision from Lee?
That's not my area. That would be more the homelessness side. We do have a care and support element within the directorate that I work in Five, where we've got we've got the homeless hostels, and we've got some mental health provision. Yeah. I believe that our general needs team work with the STAR model in Caerphilly, which I believe is similar to Housing First. If you're asking whether we would accept Housing First clients into our sheltered schemes, that would entirely depend on the offer that was being given for the person. We consider everybody, nobody's a no. You know, if someone would fit in and we could assist them and build their capacity to maintain their contract and live a happy, healthy life, then we would absolutely consider that.
And it's wonderful to have had Lorraine with us this afternoon. Many of us know Lorraine of old, and she's been a long-term friend of the LIN. Lorraine, you've posted a couple of things, one referring to the expert group that the Welsh Government had 5 years ago. I know Sally's put the link into the chat box, but you also ask about how can sort of housing be a much more citizen-led approach and work together to reach this vision. Well, we've tried to capture some of that this afternoon, but does anybody want to come back on that specifically?
I think for me, some of the points. Well, we touched on, there was a bit of a split in the agenda today. Hearing residents' voice was a common theme throughout, but the first part of the agenda was, you know, around building structures, etc., with a slightly different focus. In the second part of the session, but certainly picking up on some of Sean's points, which I think do link with Lorraine's comments. It is about that attachment to place, isn't it? And it's about acknowledging attachment to place, and that one size doesn't fit all. And so some of the things that I really liked about Tom's presentation was around that design for life, for moving in at different points of your life and being able to stay in that environment without any major works, because that early planning, those early discussions had already taken place. I think some of the things that really came out for me from David's presentation was, I know the terminology is different. David, you use the terminology downsizing. Lorraine uses the term right sizing. And you know, it's a subtle difference, but I think some of the points that David talked about was that almost a shift from housing need to aspiration, you know, for this to look really attractive, for people to want to be here rather than, oh, you know, I've got to move because of A, B and C. So I guess, you know, it is, what we do is, it's all that continuum, isn't it? It is about the support in our own homes and communities. Certainly social housing plays a part in that wider continuum of homes for older people. I don't know if that's covered.
No, I was struck by that as well, Joanne. And the other thing, I suppose, was about, it's not just about retrofitting our accommodation and the property, it's also about retrofitting our wider place, you know, the reshaping the community and the neighbourhoods. And I think each of you touched on that, both whether it was sort of the conversations you were having with residents or wanting to have interventions that actually make some really meaningful impact and outcomes for your residents. So I think, you know, Michelle, you talked about sort of like public space and green space not being available. You know, how do you address those sort of issues? You know, the sustainability agenda, the conversations that Alan had, the conversations intergenerationally that Gary talked on. You know, each of you have sort of brought in different things, which I think we as a steering group for the Welsh LIN would love to take forward with you and explore in 2024. Joanne, do you want to? Sorry, Tom, go on. You've got your hand up.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything that's been said, and my thoughts went to the fact that it's not just for, say, development, looking at the new build properties, or you know, and David mentioned the, you know, the schemes that they're building. It's not just one department. I think that the conversation goes across a whole housing association, across communities, across different support networks, but also it should be right for those individuals, and everyone has a different choice. My thoughts went to the whole conversations, not consultations, especially when it comes to co-design and what residents want to see from their developments, rather than us saying, here's a rooftop terrace, this is how you're going to use it. Actually, here's a possibility. What would you consider using that for? Well, actually, we prefer to have a facility on the ground floor, so the community can use it as well. like the conversations can be more informed and more cooperative, rather than like a consultation saying, this is the plan, what do you think of it? Well, I'm sorry, it's already been gone through planning, it's been costed, we're going to be doing it anyway, hopefully you can like it when it's delivered. And hope, you know, I think the conversations go broader than one department, but also engage meaningfully with the residents.
Yeah, no, excellent point. Well, look, I think we're just slightly after 5 o'clock, and I'm going to draw this to a close. And can I thank all of you for your wonderful presentations? Can I also thank Joanne for both being a fantastic chair of the Housing LIN here in Wales, but also for sort of helping us sort of shape the programme for the whole year. In fact, we'll be meeting in early January to try and set out a landscape for 2024. As well. So again, thank you for your support. Can I thank steering group members who've not participated today for your input during the course of this year. If anybody wishes to join our steering group, do drop Joanne or myself an email. We look forward to having a conversation with you. Joanne, have you got some final words?
Yeah, I feel really uplifted. I echo your thanks to everybody that's made today happen. I'd like to extend that to Sally, who I know is here on the call, and to you, Jeremy, and the wider Housing LIN team. Your support is always appreciated. I think I will leave today's session feeling really positive. Because we talked, or I introduced the tough context at the beginning of the session, but actually there's an awful lot of ambition in Wales. There's a lot of investment going on. That came through, you know, really, really clearly this afternoon. You know, organisations are spending money. There's an awful lot of collaboration going on. It feels like a good time. It's tough and it's difficult, but it feels like a good time to be involved in housing and the wider provision and delivery of housing in Wales. So thank you very much. And I will make contact with several of the speakers today. I've scribbled down my notes, so thank you. Can't wait to hear about how the electric vehicle carpool works out. That's on my list. And that's it from me. So thank you very much. Thank you for making the time. Thank you for your contributions. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, and from all of us, a real, well, I was going to say season's greetings. Have a great festive break when you get to that. And thanks, everybody. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Bye.